the African American Film Critics Association. Today, we're delighted to be talking with the very talented cast of the hit show 4400. I'm going to kick things off by introducing you to our facilitator today, Katia Woods in Philadelphia, Carolyn Hines in Toronto, Dana Abercrombie in New York, and Rhonda Rasha Penrise, who will be joining us shortly in Atlanta. I'm going to let you guys do your thing, and I will see you on the other side.
Abercrombie from the Koalition. This show is really beautiful.
Hey!
I absolutely loved how the show is unfolding with the mysteries and everything else. And I really wanted to know, can you talk about the importance of focusing on the disenfranchised, the people who don't normally are looked for? Because that is the overall arching theme, and that is the connection point, especially for me as a person of color.
Yeah. I feel like it really does come down to that need for representation, for seeing yourself seen on camera too much. Like, all of the people who are represented in this show have not had their stories told. I'm so happy that we were just sort of nominated for a GLAAD award just because of the amount of representation we have in the stories that we're telling about people who haven't had their stories told in this way. And I think it matters. It matters with feeling like you are a piece of this country, or like, you as a person matters in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I agree with everything Jojo said. And to me, it's really important for us to realize that Black history is American history, and that a lot of our stories are what made and what make America what it is today. And I think it's really important for us to know our history, because if we don't know where we've come from, then we can't really know where we're going.
Well, thank you so much.
Hi, Carolyn. First, here's what happened in Carolyn Talks podcast. This show is super interesting in that it explores how how all the characters are finding out new things about themselves as they're adjusting to this new future and this new idea of what who they are is in the future. Can you just talk about finding yourselves and finding the characters' new identity under all of this confusion, especially like your relationships to your family, to everyone around you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess that's for me then, right? Yeah. Well, Claudette, coming from the 50s, I mean, it's a very different world, the 50s versus 2021. And I think something that makes her very special is that she just has an amazing ability to adapt to whatever situation she's in. She had to do that when she was growing up in the 40s and in the 50s, and she has to do it now. And I think the power that she has really allows for her to shine in that ability to adapt to her surroundings. So Claudette is doing great, in my opinion. She's doing great.
I think so much of what makes this show so accessible and so universal to people is how much of us, even in this time period, are trying to find our place in this world and trying to find sort of where we fit in. But I think the overarching theme of this show and finding your own voice, your own powers, is one that sort of speaks to us as a community, is one that speaks to us as a generation, because it's so much of what we need to do as people and as a culture.
Great, thank you.
What soul show? I love this show. I love all that type of stuff. Sci-fi, all of it. And it's like the most interesting thing in, and I hope people finally do get it, because we as Black people are not monolithic, but I love how, especially them coming from the different eras, how they're trying to understand not only what's going on, but it's like, wait a minute, this one Black person is being very demanding, like, girl, you trying to get us killed type of thing. But then they're still continuing anxieties that have overlapped no matter what time frame they're in. Talk about what it's like to be able to work on a show where we get to examine that, and you don't have to apologize for it, because it's just part of, hey, you're from the 1950s, this person's from the 80s, this other person's from the 90s, and everybody has a different idea of what it means to be Black or stand in your Blackness. And no one is necessarily wrong or right. They're just moving in the way that they're used to moving. And Jaye, you can start first, please.
Yeah, I think as a Black woman and having seen my fellow Black people, I think we all know what it feels like to be great and be looked over, even in the midst of that. And so I think that's one thing that all of the characters, especially the ones who've come to 2021, know exactly what that feels like, whether it's Andre being the doctor in the 1920s and not getting credited for the research and the work that he did, or whether it's Claudette's character and the integral role that she played in the beginning of the civil rights movement while her husband is the face of it, or Shanice being a lawyer and what that means to be a Black female lawyer in America in any point in time. So I think we all, even though we might have different language, we might speak a little bit differently, we all know what it feels like to be great and to not be recognized for that. And so I think that's a really big part of where we can connect and where we can all be unified in that.
Mm-hmm. I agree wholly with what Jaye just said. And Kathy, like speaking to your point, we aren't a monolith. And I feel like that's why representation matters, man. It matters in these shows so much, because you have a show where it has like one Black person in it, and what you say about that character is what your show's perspective on Black people are. Like, you don't have the opportunity to show the different facets and the different like perspectives that Black people have as a whole. Like, there was so much diversity just within our community that we never really get to see or explore because there's, you know, only one or two of us on the show. So they're like, we can't touch on that and have the Black person do that because then we're saying this about them. And I don't know, luckily, because of the representation that our show has, we can explore all the different facets of Black culture and LGBTQ culture and a bunch of the other different races that are represented in this.
Fantastic, thank you.
Hi, it's Rhonda. Forgive me for my tardiness. But forgive me. But I'm interested because, you know, just I've watched you when you were on Nashville. So I'm interested at what point of your career were you at when this show came about? What were your initial thoughts, and were there any trepidation for the both of you to launch into a show like this, especially being so different from perhaps roles that you were able to play in the past?
Yeah. It's funny because this show kind of came at the perfect time for me. I had already been feeling, I guess, the need and the drive to do something, to lend my voice to something that I felt like encapsulated what time we were going through. And I'm talking about during 2020 and all of the different protests that were going on around the country. Like, I had written stuff myself, but we were out there protesting like every other day. And I was like, I don't know if what I'm doing is making a difference. And when that happens, it was just like such a drive to be a part of something that is going to make a difference. It is going to be reaching people in their homes around the nation and everything. And this show came about, and it touched on so much of what I was feeling, what I wanted to see on TV, and like a lot of the different ways that I felt about things. So it felt almost perfect. And I was like, I don't know which role I fit into in this, but I know that I have to be a part of the show. And luckily it ended up working out.
I'd say for me, I booked this well into the pandemic, actually almost a year to the day between my last gig and when I booked this. So it was amazing to get the audition for this because I'm actually very familiar with characters from this time period. I play a lot of period roles in the theater work that I do. And so getting into Claudette's mindset was a little bit easier for me to do, which was really awesome. And thankfully it panned out. In addition to that, I needed a job. You know what I'm saying? So, no, yeah. But like, honestly, I'm very grateful to be able to be telling these stories and to be showcasing these people that we don't get to see very often. And I think it's so important, because the more you get to see people that you're not familiar with, the more you start to see their humanity, and the more you start to see them reflected, the more you see yourself reflected in people that are different than you. I think that's where a lot of our problems could be solved.
Or you can see yourself in people who look like you, because you've never been able to see that on TV.
That too.
Hello, Dana again. My question is for Ms. Ladymore. I was wondering, because I kind of asked Joseph this earlier before. One of the things is you guys get the episodes when they come, so you don't fully get the full picture of everything. As an actress, how do you fully get a grasp of the character, its intentions, the motives, what's going to happen, without fully having that information there?
Yeah, I'll say it is a journey, especially because I, like I said, most of my background is in theater. And so with a play, you get all of the story, right? All up front, all at the beginning, because you got to do the whole thing. And so I kind of took a little bit of what I do to prepare for theater and applied it to this as much as I could, in that even when we only had episodes 1 and 2, I was figuring out, what year was Claudette born? Does she have siblings? What's her favorite color? What's her favorite food? What's her middle name? What's her maiden name? Just things to help me understand who she is as a person and craft her to be as three-dimensional as she can possibly be with the limited amount of information that I have on her. And so it did get easier and easier, obviously, as we got more and more episodes. And knowing that my episode was going to be number 7 was super helpful, because when we started getting to like episode 4 and 5, I was like, okay, y'all, it's about time. I need that script. Where is it? And so there's a balance, and you just kind of have to make up what you can, and then take what's given with the script and bug the writers and the producers as much as you can for information. Yeah.
I really loved your episode.
I did too.
Thank you.
And Carolyn again. So before you talked a bit about the characters being disenfranchised, and that's what a lot of what the show is about. I want to talk about getting powers now, about being empowered as the characters, because I think it's amazing that while these characters are disenfranchised from all, I'm gonna get to you, don't worry, you're not left out, from all these characters being disenfranchised in the eras that they came from. While they came through a traumatic experience, like being dropped into this new future, they got powers. And for like Claudette, she has the ability to heal, which I think as a Black woman is amazing, because it shows resilience. And then for Jarrell, you may not have superpowers, but his ability is being able to empathize and connect with different people. And that's a power. I see that as a superpower, because not everyone is able to do that. So can both of you talk about those aspects of being empowered in your characters, and you as actors yourselves taking inspiration from these powers yourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll start. I'll start. Yeah, when the audition came through and I saw that she had powers and that she could heal herself, I mean, I was over the moon, absolutely just over the moon, because I'm already kind of a superhero nerd anyway. And so immediately I thought that she was Wolverine, and then that actually ended up being a line in the script as well. But I think it's beautiful to see the strength manifested in a physical way. The strength that Black women have mentally and emotionally manifested through Claudette's ability to heal. And it just shows that, like, we've been through so much, right? We've been through so much over the years, but we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. We were going to stay here. We're going to continue to be powerful and strong and continue to fight for the things that mean the most to us. And I think it empowers her to empower other people. She's invincible. So like, if she can do it, then she can empower other people to step outside of their comfort zone and do the things that they know are right. Maybe not easy, but they know that they're right.
Yeah. And touching on what you said, I am also a super comic book, superpowers nerd. And it has almost become a running joke about how much I want powers on the show. And I'm like the only character who's probably not going to get powers. But no, I do feel like there's something sort of supernatural in Jarrell's ability to not only empathize, but always try to fight for understanding and the right thing within a situation. And it's special to be able to get somebody to see the humanity in someone else. And I think that's what he's been fighting for this entire season, you know? And it's reaching people subtly and slowly. And you've seen the way that him and Keisha's bond has grown and the things that she's like opened her eyes to and everything. But I do feel like that's kind of a superpower. But Jarrell's arc is sort of showing, I don't know, the natural power that we all have to reach people, to find understanding. And also, I need
really wants a superpower.
Season 4, bro. If we get to that season 4 and I don't have powers, I will personally be crushed.
Okay, but what power would you choose if you could?
What superpower? Me personally, I'd want to be in 2 places at once. I want to like be able to split myself up and do other things, just because I got so many things that I got to do and I never get to all of them. And then one of me could just be like sleeping and recouping all of the exhaustion that I have throughout the day.
So you'd be like my girl on Invincible, man.
Yeah.
They need to do her better. Thank you.
It's a good power.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Kathy again. So speaking of you, Joseph, one of the things that I loved is even from the beginning, you were different from everyone else in quote unquote law enforcement side. You went in it as, wait a minute, these people are not our enemies. Our job is not to imprison them, but to help them work through of something that was done to them, you know, even to your own personal family detriment, that you had your brother sitting in front of you and you didn't know it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So because you're thinking about them instead of you, you know, everything that your character does for the most part is always like, how can we make the situation better? You know, you see the good in everyone, which in a way makes you so vulnerable. And part of me is like, sir, you gotta be a little mean though. You know what I mean? But it is a beautiful thing to see, because your character's heart is so, he's not, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I think in terms it makes everyone around him better. So I know it's hard to, like, what do you see yourself in, and what it's like to play somebody who really wants the good people to win in spite of what's happening?
It's fun. I think like so much of it speaks to how we as a society look at people. I mean, we tell our stories like there are good people and bad people out there, but there's just people making decisions every day. And before I sort of took this role, I had worked and spoke with a lot of different social workers, and some of them had worked with officers to respond to calls, so things could be de-escalated, and they wouldn't be, I guess, approaching situations when people like they were criminals, but people with like mental health issues and stuff, people who just needed to like relax and calm down. Maybe they were like off of medication and everything, but like being there with an officer with a gun who could like at any second like see a threat and like put them down or whatever, and like being able to help this person see the humanity in the person in front of them was like the biggest part of their jobs. And it was the biggest thing that I took away from the research that I did before the role. And I wanted to bring that to Jarrell. Like I said before in the last question, like I do feel like that is a superpower in itself. And those people who do that in real life, like they're heroes to these people whose lives they're able to save or to keep safe. And we need that.
Curiously, how do you two describe the show to other people?
That is a good question.
Great question.
It's funny, they gave us like this whole rundown of how to like describe the show, from like a sort of press standpoint, everything. But I don't know. I mean, I describe it as honestly this like cultural representation version of X-Men, that has like, oh, sorry, something just happened out there, that has like a heart to it.
Good description.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, the most obvious, the one that's kind of like been drilled into my brain is 4,400 is about 4,400 people who have been taken from their time period and got and they have powers and they're all trying to figure out what to do with their powers. And yeah. But on another level, it's like, it's about an unlikely family coming together, right? And people figuring out how to deal with a new time period, with new powers, with new relationships, people figuring out how to be themselves, their truest state of themselves in a time period that they're unfamiliar with. And it just so happens that people time travel within that as well, and that people have powers.
Yeah, I asked because I don't know how to describe it to people.
Yeah. You could just say, like, look at the original series.
Right. It's such a unique concept to put into like a concise soundbite and be like, oh, yeah. It's like this, because it's not like anything else. It's like it is the 4,400.
You just have to watch it.
I know.
Question for both of you, kind of a different way of structuring because you are different experiences. For Ladymore, I was wondering if Claudette had the ability to go back to the 50s after everything that she learned, how different and what would she bring with her? And I guess for you, Joseph, since you're still in 2021, you're a different person than when you started out in episode 1. Could you talk about where do you see the character going now in terms of everything that he's learned thus far, his growth?
I don't know. I feel like I don't know if you wanted to start it out, Jay.
Right.
Oh, okay. I feel like his arc during this first season was in some ways a sort of disillusionment arc. He spent the entire time sort of idealizing who his brother was, only to find out like who his brother actually was, and then also who he had become. You know what? Scratch that. Take it back. What episode are y'all on? I'm so sorry. What episode did y'all see? Y'all on 10?
I believe we were on 10.
Okay, you know what?
We have 11 as well.
I feel like he's become disillusioned with the government and you know what? Jay, you go. I'm gonna think back on what I can say, and then
got through 10. They got through 10, so that's pretty far in.
Okay, so
you didn't ruin anything.
Okay.
You didn't ruin anything. To answer your question, I first don't know if Claudette would want to go back to the 50s. There are a lot of things that have not changed about that time and now, but there are also a lot of things that have. And I don't know if she'd be willing to give those things up. I know I wouldn't be. But if she did have to go back, then she would obviously want to keep her powers with her for sure. She wouldn't go back if those would get taken away or anything. And I think just the level of surety that she has in herself to make change happen, I think she would probably be a little bit more proactive in getting the things done that she believes should be done. Because she had the ideas back in the 50s, but she sort of let her husband dictate whether those ideas came to fruition or not. And so I think she would mainly just bring a new sense of confidence in, no, I know what I'm doing. I know that the things that I'm thinking and the things that I want to do would be beneficial. And so I think she would just go in with the confidence to actually make those things happen.
And a spoiler-free version. I feel like now that he no longer works at the Bois Blanc, his new, his new goal, his new arc is just going to be trying to find different ways to not only advocate for the 4,400, but to continue helping them acclimate to society in the world, to help them be accepted by the world.
You did it. It's fine. You did.
I know I am the Tom Holland of this universe right now.
We're not going to let you get that far. Don't worry.
You weren't as bad as Tom Holland.
Okay.
One of the main themes for this season of 4400 is the 4400 learning to fit into society for them personally, but also getting society to accept them. Because again, we talked about the show about being people who are disenfranchised, but it's interesting that they came and they're still disenfranchised, but in a collective way rather than individually. So just talk about that aspect, because I think it's really interesting that the writers did that, where they're like, you guys were disenfranchised in your time periods, in your eras, in your families, and in your groups, but you came here and guess what? You're all excommunicated from the rest of society. So talk about that in particular, especially for Jarrell, who started out as an immigration counselor, whose job was to help people integrate into society.
Yeah. Can you still hear me? I know there's a lot of noise going on outside next to me. Okay. I feel like, I don't know, it's a real testament to how great of storytellers we have on this show, because so much of the commentary that we have in the show is just done organically through story and through like how they've structured these people's lives within the show. So to have them being marginalized in their time periods and coming here and still being marginalized is like showing how much hasn't changed just in like the history of this country. But then on top of that, like having Jarrell be a social worker for immigrants and then having these people be detained is sort of echoing how we were treating people at our borders, everything, where there were like so many different atrocities committed under the guise of keeping people safe. And you see children being separated from their families and everything. And it's like, how is this keeping us safe? Like these people aren't threats, they're just people. And I feel like that's kind of the energy and then the tone that I came and approached the character with in his relationship to the 4400 with.
I'd say that it adds another layer of concern, really, because all of these characters knew what it felt like to be marginalized in their own time period for whatever reason. And now on top of that, they have the fact that they have powers, the fact that they all came back from a random time period and nobody knows why or who they are or any of that. It just adds another layer of, oh, I got to worry about this now. But instead of that feeling, I know at least for Claudette that it's empowering for her. It's like, if I dealt with being a Black woman in the 50s and the 40s, y'all can't throw anything at me that I can't handle, and I can heal. Okay, let's go. So I think there's a level of strength that comes from having already been pushed aside in their own time period. And even though they are more so now, they have something to fight back with. They have these powers, they have their family, this created family of 4400 to support. And so I think it allows for more strength.
I think it's so interesting how they're discussing how North America is still extremely prejudiced, but it's just that it will find new ways to other people, even if if it's not race, gender, whatever. You're just like, you're still not of us. So I like that the show's exploring that aspect of society.
The women on this show are not just there to be the women, and I love that they get to have different points of views. And when we first get introduced to you, you're very observant. You're taking it all in, whereas other people are like, going for it. And even the concept of the nails, I thought that was so smart, because that wasn't something that we were doing in your time era, the nail art, the long nails and everything. You weren't thinking like, why is this child's nail like that? You were like, wait a minute, I noticed something with my body. And I was like, oh, she's gonna make it, because she she's thinking things through. She understands that this isn't just about them being a different time. She's saying there are other things going on, and I got to start putting two and two together. What that's one of the things I love about her. And tell me a little bit, how do you feel that she thinks things through? Is that because of her relationship with her husband, or is it that she understands the gravity of the situation?
I think it's both. I think it's all of the above. Coming from the time period that she came from, she had to be extremely observant of her surroundings so as not to get killed for looking at somebody the wrong way, for stepping on the wrong side of the street, for singing too loudly, for speaking too loudly, for not speaking at all. So I think she knows what it feels like to have to be that observant about her surroundings just to make it to the next day. And so I think she counts that as a part of one of her strengths, I think, in that she has the ability to wait to speak so that when she does, it's effective, and people listen and people take note. So I count it as another superpower almost for her, that she has that ability to not always be the first one to speak, but when she does, you're going to hear it and you're going to listen.
Fantastic. Thank you again, guys.
Jay, there was something you said about Claudette not wanting to, go back to that time, but curiously, for the both of you, like if you had a choice of time periods to go back to, which would you choose?
I would want to go back to probably Egypt. Like really see what it was like to live in that society, and also see us as kings,
My answer is going to be much more superficial than that. I would say like the early 2000s, just before technology took off, just because I feel like we related to each other a little bit easier back then, before texting became the main means of communication. When people still called people on the phone, when people still wrote letters, oh my gosh, So I'd want to go back to just before technology really took off, because I feel like, I don't know, it just felt like a tighter knit world to me.
Really? I was there. I don't think so.
I was younger at that time, and like things weren't, I wasn't well versed in the world at that time, but it felt easier to not have to check my phone every hour of every day. It felt easier.
You don't know the joy of having a phone, of not being like, I tell people when they talk about Uber, I think about like how when you had to go to an event and you had to leave with the other people and you didn't have the autonomy you have now, you had to like go to get to a landline to talk to someone. Like, no.
It's so romanticized like the 90s and the early 2000s now.
Yeah, but not before like phones were invented or anything like that. Just before they were so prevalent, like when they were still an accessory and not a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph and Jay, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Oh, hey, thanks.
We are so happy to see the two of you, and we look forward to supporting you with this project and throughout your careers. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film critics, thank you for watching this episode of Africa